David, thanks. Appleton's Safety and Licensing Committee tonight unanimously recommending that a special events permit for a No Kings rally be approved despite organizers missing a deadline requiring 45 days notice. The exemption would be one of only a handful since the policy has been in place for the past 14 months. For the third time since President Donald Trump was elected, Appleton will join cities across the country in hosting a No Kings protest on March 28th. But organizers this time are expanding the event, which requires a special events permit that the group filed for 8 days late.
No Kings is not new to our community. In the previous events, organizers successfully prepared and kept the crowd safe, and volunteers worked carefully to ensure that the crowd was safe and peaceful and well organized, and we plan to do that again.
The reason for the special events permit is because organizers wrote in their application, quote, anyone can participate. We plan to march in the street. And it goes on to say we would like no police presence if possible, end quote. That request, the police chief says, isn't possible.
We're bound by state statutes which dictate that we have to be responsible for road closures. That's not something that can be delegated to a marshal or something in this case.
Also, the police chief says 8 officers will be paid overtime and have a presence. Previous No Kings protests in Appleton, including one last October near Houdini Plaza, attracted counter-protesters but were mostly peaceful.
This permit matters because it allows us to manage the march portion safely and predictably, because with the crowd we are expecting, we do not think confining them to sidewalks is a realistic goal.
On the No Kings official website, the protest is listed as taking place from 3 to 5 in the afternoon, along with several others across northeast Wisconsin. The vote tonight contingent on a traffic control plan, which is still in the works, also being approved, which the full city council will vote on next week.